Kansas City first after starting the season at 1 despite Pete picking Jags to go to the Super Bowl in the AFC. He also thought San Francisco would get to Super Bowl 58. They did. Second after Niners were 5th in Week 1, and Detroit was 15th to start the season, and they end in the top 5 for the Fighting Dan Campbells. All right, let's bring in our power rankings guru, Pete Prisco. We're also joined by Brady Quinn. So, Pete, Kansas City, they go back to back. What are your thoughts about Chiefs Kingdom trying to go 3 straight? What's the early take here for Kansas City?
Well, I don't see any reason why they can't. And obviously, Andy Reid going to be back. Patrick Mahomes going to be back. And Travis Kelce said he wants to run it back. And I do think this is one of their worst teams, and they still won the Super Bowl. That's the amazing part of it. They had all kinds of flaws. The receivers couldn't catch the football. You looked at the tackles. They struggled all year. And I think they still found a way to win it. So when you look at it from that standpoint, add a receiver, get a big play receiver somehow, some way, maybe in the draft. Maybe you add one. Bring back Chris Jones. I would make sure to bring him back. Find a way to get L'Jarius Sneed if you have to tag one and run it back. And I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be in the mix to repeat again.
Well, of course, Pete. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is their quarterback, so they're going to have a shot, merely just because he is back there leading this team. But let's not forget Steve Spagnuolo just signed an extension, too, with the Chiefs, so he'll be back as their defensive coordinator. That's a big piece. But to your point, not only was this maybe, I don't know, I guess you'll call it the worst team, which that's one way of putting it for a Super Bowl champion, but they also took the most difficult path we've seen a Chiefs Super Bowl champion take. When you think about the fact that they played in frigid temperatures at home against the Miami Dolphins, not necessarily an easy task versus that offense and considering the conditions. And then you have to go on the road to Buffalo, to Baltimore, to beat 2 of the top teams, 2 of the best quarterbacks in Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, and then finally the San Francisco 49ers on a neutral field. You could make the case that, yeah, maybe this wasn't their best, most talented roster, but it's definitely the most difficult path. So if you didn't catch the Kansas City Chiefs this year, look out, because I think next year they're only going to be better.
And Brady, you mentioned it, the Chiefs, their path to the Super Bowl, they had to go beat Buffalo, and they are number 4 on your power rankings, Pete, despite only getting to the divisional round. Pete, is that window closing for Josh Allen and the Bills to get to a Super Bowl, to win a Super Bowl? Brady, Pete can't hear us right now, so I'll ask you, do you think this window for Josh Allen and the Bills to get to a Super Bowl is closing?
I don't know if it's necessarily closing. I mean, Josh Allen's still your quarterback. You've got him under contract for the foreseeable future, and you've got Stephon Diggs, who's a heck of a #1 option. And let's not forget, too, this was a defense that was decimated by injuries this season. They did a tremendous job of overcoming a lot of that adversity and even making a run. Got much better in the second half of the season, but they're a team that I think needs a #2 at wide receiver to complement Stephon Diggs and to help out Josh Allen. And defensively, I just think they need a little more luck. They got to stay healthy. That's part of kind of the deal with every NFL season is the injury bug, and whether you get bit or not. This is a team that got bit bad, but if they can keep a lot of that group together, continue to build on this roster, provide more depth, they're going to be in the mix. There's no doubt about it. I was just more surprised that Pete put them at 4 as opposed to maybe at 5. The Detroit Lions obviously made it into the conference championship round. That's a team that I don't know that we have as many questions about moving forward into the future, and also a team that almost knocked out San Francisco, and you could make the case could have potentially been playing for a Super Bowl. So just a bit surprising that he went ahead and put the Bills over top of the Detroit Lions, given how the playoffs went.
Well, I mean, look, I think if they played on a neutral field, the Bills would beat them. And that's why I put them where they are. And yes, the Lions had a hell of a season, but I just think at the end, the Buffalo Bills were playing as well as anybody. Probably should have beat the Super Bowl champions. All he has to do is hit Shakir in the back of the end zone, and they walk off, and they have themselves probably a Super Bowl. So, look, you're nitpicking. I like it. You've done it all year, but that's the way this segment usually goes. I'm okay with that, and I would have no problem flipping them either as well, Brady.
We're taking a look at the Bills the last 4 postseasons. Again, against the rest of the league, 5-0, but against Kansas City and Cincinnati, a big offer in the win column. So the Bills have been in the playoffs for the last, 3 seasons, haven't been able to get to the big game. You could probably say the same thing about the Cowboys in the NFC, and then you see the most one-and-done postseason runs since '96, and only the Colts have had more than Dallas. Pete, things were set up for Dallas to challenge San Francisco, to give them a shot, and they lost in the wild card round of the Packers here. What's your take on Dallas, and what are your thoughts on the Cowboys moving forward?
Well, there's no doubt it was a disappointing season. I mean, you know, there was a lot of people picking them. They didn't even get to the Super Bowl. And when you looked at it, they had some injuries. But I think the most concerning thing about the Dallas Cowboys is how bad the defense was at times. They got pushed around. And you saw it early in the season or midway through the season when they went to Buffalo and got run on and run on and run on. They were just too little. And I think that's got to be the focus. You know, Dan Quinn is gone, obviously the new coach in Washington. Mike Zimmer takes over. They have to be more physical on defense. They got pushed around in the run game, and when you do that consistently, it's going to be a problem for your defense. So that's #1 priority going into the offseason. And then the flip side is you're going to have an entire season of nothing but pressure on Mike McCarthy and more pressure on Dak Prescott. So this is going to be an interesting offseason for the Dallas Cowboys.
No doubt about it. I mean, one of the things, though, if you were concerned about the loss of Dan Quinn, getting Mike Zimmer, at least in my mind and from my experience playing against him back when he was a defensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals, it's a huge get. I mean, he will challenge every single opponent come third down. The double A-gap mug look where you get both linebackers over the center, and usually that nickel or that star pressed up on the outside of the slot, and you've got to discern who's coming, who's not. That's going to be a big piece of their defense moving forward. Offensively, I think they'll continue to get better from there. They do need to shore up the offensive line and pick up that group. But Pete brings up a great point. This is a group that obviously didn't finish the season the way they wanted to. And you could make the case that the hotter team was actually the Green Bay Packers. And I know Pete gets on me for being nitpicky, but we're at that time of the year. It's the last one for quite some time before we get into football season, at the beginning of August next year. So the reality is the hotter team, probably the better team at the end of the season, was the Green Bay Packers. The only concern there was their defense, and they also got a new defensive coordinator, so they should be much improved next season. So if it was up to me, I'd be switching the Packers ahead of the Dallas Cowboys heading into 2024.
All right, Pete, let's talk about the Eagles. They land ahead of Tampa Bay on your final power rankings list, despite losing to the Bucs in the wild card round. Why does Philly go ahead of Tampa Bay?
Well, I mean, look, I know they beat him in the postseason, and that should matter to some, but I just think the Eagles were the better team all year. Remember, the Bucs kind of snuck into the postseason, didn't really play well all year, did get a little hot in the playoffs, had a chance to beat the Lions, in fact. But I think as a whole, I think the Eagles were the better team. The Eagles will also, change. They made some changes in the offseason. I think they'll get back. The Super Bowl hangover was real for the Philadelphia Eagles. People always say it's not. That talented team did not play up to the talent around Jalen Hurts, and he was part of the problem as well. So I think they were the better team in the end. They just lost the postseason game. That's why I had them where they were.
You know, it's always hard to get a sense for why Pete puts teams in certain spots throughout the year. It's really just his opinion. There's times when he says, well, I'm looking at their trend or where I think they're going to be. So if we're looking at this particular power rankings and we're looking at heading into 2024 and we're talking about the additions of Vic Fangio, defensive coordinator, and Kellen Moore, offensive coordinator, you should feel really bullish about this team moving forward. And also because Howie Roseman has continued to put together a very competitive roster, a deep roster. We know they'll make moves to make that happen. So as I look into 2024, this shouldn't be a number 12 ranked team in Pete's power rankings. They probably should be a top 10 team based on what they've done at the coordinator positions, which was the real big question coming in this last season. So I think you'll see improvement from Jalen Hurts, this offense, as well as the defense more than anything else.
Let's go to the bottom of the power rankings, list. Number 26, Pete, you have the Jets. They end the season, of course. They're looking ahead to 2024. Aaron Rodgers supposed to be back week 1 after that Achilles injury. And Pete, not only a lot of expectations for Aaron Rodgers, but also a big year for Robert Saleh as well.
Yeah, there's no doubt this is a win or else year for Robert Saleh, and you read some of the stories coming out of that building. There's a lot of concern about the paranoia around the building, who's leaking things and all that kind of talk, and that's never a good situation for an organization, and Robert Saleh probably knows he has to win. He lost his quarterback in the very first game. You know, a franchise quarterback, a guy they thought could take him to the Super Bowl, and he wasn't going to win with Zach Wilson. He wasn't going to win consistently with that offense. And so this is a big year. Aaron Rodgers has to come back and play like Aaron Rodgers, and Robert Saleh has to win. And by win, I mean get into the postseason or he will be gone.
I'm again just surprised by how these rankings work themselves out. I mean, this was a 7-win team. I know it didn't finish the season very well, but you have a 4-win team ranked a spot ahead of them, Pete. I mean, help it makes sense to me. And plus, again, if we're looking into the future, regardless of the pressure that's on Robert Saleh and what they've looked like, we know they went all in on Aaron Rodgers. They only got to play 4 snaps this past season. I think with that defense, with some of the pieces they have on offense, this is going to be a playoff contending team if you get a healthy Aaron Rodgers. That doesn't sound like a big if. I think he will be healthy. He will be playing, and he will be playing as one of the best quarterbacks in the AFC. So another team that you've got way down on the list, I can understand that based on what we saw in 2023, but to have the Cardinals ahead of them, I mean, come on, man, that doesn't make any sense. And if we're looking forward into the future, Rodgers is going to have an entire offseason again to build around this group, and they should have a better offensive line to protect him, and maybe a couple other weapons too on the outside for him.
We'll see if Brady is as critical of the Chargers at 30 here. Pete, take us through the thought process here of the Bolts.
Well, I mean, they weren't very good this year. This is not looking ahead, by the way. This is kind of where you are right now. I mean, if you look ahead, yeah, I'm bullish on Jim Harbaugh. I think it's a great hire. They have some work to do. I mean, look, yeah, it's a great job because you have Justin Herbert. You have Jim Harbaugh coming in. I like what he's going to do to that team, but it might take a little time. This is they have to be physical under Jim Harbaugh, and they have some work to do to get that to where it needs to be on both offensive and defensive lines. So I like the outlook for the future, but right now, that was a disaster, and we know the head coach got fired. We know their quarterback wasn't in at the end of the year. There were a lot of injuries on that roster, which is why they are where they are right now.
Yeah, again, though, Pete, this is a team that won more games than some of the teams you have in front of them. So even if you're using your argument for right here and now, they were still a better team, very similar to the New York Jets, who I just said you had them behind a 4-win team. They won 3 more games this season. So, again, I realize this is your opinion. This is what you think at this point. I'm much more bullish on this particular team. I think this will be a playoff team next year with Jim Harbaugh as their coach. He will get that organization right. He will get them Justin Herbert playing, maybe not putting up as big as stats, but playing at a high level at the quarterback spot, taking some of that pressure off of them, helping them to play a more physical brand of football on both sides of the line of scrimmage. So you can have them ranked 30th now, but obviously they're drafting 5th overall with a couple of teams that you've got ahead of them who had worse records.
Hey, let me ask you this, Brady. At the end of the year, with Easton Stick playing quarterback, would they have beat the Arizona Cardinals?
I don't know. I think they would have beat the New England Patriots.
Would they have beat the Arizona Cardinals? That's the team you pointed out. Or would they have beat the Arizona Cardinals with Easton Stick?
Pete, where are we playing the game? And you just mentioned the hire of Jim Harbaugh. That's what I'm saying is like you pick and choose when you want to make your argument for where you want to rank them.
Jim Harbaugh wasn't the coach at the end of the year. Jim Harbaugh wasn't the coach at the end of the year.
Pete, we can hear you. You don't need to repeat yourself. We understand, but you can't use your rationale as they just hired Jim Harbaugh, and that's what's going to make this team better in the future if you're using this for your rankings. You can't pick and choose when you want to use your certain arguments. The reality is you haven't even answered the question about the Jets.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. So check back in August. You have a new set of power rankings to complain about.
The Jets, as a 7-win team, should be behind the Arizona Cardinals.
Were they any good at the end of the year? Were they any good at the end of the year? They were terrible.
I look at the entirety of the year. They seem to be a better team than the Cardinals were.
Not at the end of the year, they weren't.
The back and forth.
Yes, even not in studio.
I know.
The energy
even
is there.
through Zoom or Skype. It's been a really fun season watching you guys go back and forth on not only power rankings, but picks as well. And it came down to the wire when it came to NFL picks. And Brady, he's got the trophy. He's got the crown. Pete looks really angry.
I mean, that's what happens when you lose by, what, half a game?
You know what? Kudos to Brady Quinn. He won fair and square. Nothing but praise for what a great picker he is. But I will say this. I picked that game with my best bet right. I should be the winner because that was an under all the way. And somehow, some way, it found a way to go over.
Pete, we're not sure what you're talking about. I think we gave you credit for the under. If you actually looked at the Super Bowl bets, we both hit both our bets. But anyway, the point is, look, Pete, it's been an absolute pleasure doing picks with you the past couple of seasons, even though you turned out to be a loser. We do have some things dialed up for you, though. We wanted to point out the fact that despite losing, you've been incredibly entertaining and fun to work with, and there's no one else on Valentine's Day that I'd want to spend time with to talk about our NFL picks than you, Pete Prisco.
Oh, that
Brady
warms
Quinn
my heart.
And Pete Prisco here for another year of picks. Who won last season?
Brady did.
Yeah. Brady won last season. All right, Pete. Better get off the schneid.
Patriots win the game outright. How about that? Stroud won't look as good. I'll take the Falcons. Best bet. Fields is playing better. I think you'll see this one get a little loose, and I'm going to take the over in this game. And I want to put an asterisk next to last week's best bet, by the way, while we're at it. The captain always goes down with the ship.
What the hell was that?
I have the Packers as my best bet.
What is that?
I'm going with the Cowboys. They win the game outright. I don't need the 3 points. Take them on the money line. Okay, I'm going to take the Bills. I think they just wreak havoc on the Broncos. This is the get-right game for Buffalo. And Denver isn't as good as their win streak. I think Cleveland dominates this game and wins it. I'll take the Browns. My best bets have been awful, okay? Terrible. It's time to turn it around. So I'm going away from a side. I'm going to take a total.
Oh, is that when you struggle and you go to totals?
I'm taking a page out of
Todd Furman's book?
I'm taking a page out of Todd Furman's books. You know, desperation, you do desperate things. And I'm going to go over in the Buffalo-Kansas City game. Taking the Bills-Dolphins over. I think Josh Allen has a big day. I think Miami will try and keep up. They'll score some points, but I'm taking the over.
Fade Pete's best bet.
By the way, I had the over in the Bills-Dolphins game, and they got tackled at the inch line at the end of the half because he made a mistake. Otherwise, that game goes over.
Always an excuse. Always an excuse.
What? Otherwise it goes over?
Huh?
Is the over?
Otherwise it goes over?
Yeah, it would have been 28 points at the half. It was going over then.
That was fantastic. By the way, between me and producer Jack Capitorno, Pete, if you ever leave us for another network, you owe me and Jack 5% each, by the way, for curating these things. I do want to piggyback on what Chris Hassel said, by the way. The best bets were something you did struggle with this year up until the very end. You did get hot a little bit. What happened?
You know, I played too many totals this year with my best bets, and, you know, a lot of times this thing didn't go the way I needed to go at the very end, and that's why I had a bad run. I've learned my lesson. I'm not going to use a lot of totals next year. I'm getting off the Todd Furman way of thinking. I'm going to handle it myself next year, and I'm making a guarantee I will win the season next year. Guaranteed.
A guarantee already for next year.
Please clip that. Please clip that and save that for the 2024 season. And Pete, how are you not going to call out Tommy, who's claiming victory? He's claiming victory of our best bets, even though it wasn't a level playing field with some of those picks.
I mean, Tommy has the crown, 14-8. Is that your record for best bets?
First off, that wasn't my claim.
No.
Here we go.
Tommy does not have a crown. Tommy, hey, Brady, as you know, and we both know because we were there the entire season, Tommy didn't make picks the first 2 weeks, and Jack just awarded him the victories based on what he might have picked.
No. Here's what happened as the confetti falls.
For Tommy.
I didn't make a pick the first week, and then Jack gave me 2 in week 2, but ever since then, it's been kosher. But
I don't know about that. There was another Sunday you missed in there, Tommy, too. We talked about that yesterday.
Yeah, Brady, you had one.
Brady is the champ of the best bets. Brady won the best bets. Tommy finished second, and I was a way distant third.
We'll have to prove it next year.
Pete's trying to take your crown, Tommy.
Yeah, well, he can't have it.
The photo says it all. It's set in stone, so it doesn't matter.
I got to update that headshot, too. I don't have that haircut anymore. The Pick Six podcast, fresh off the Super Bowl. Scan the QR code however you listen to your podcast and check them out on YouTube.